Lies, rumors, and lies. Let's talk off-season basketball in New York City's.
Top on. Top on. Top on.
Our theme music gets me hype. You guys can't even hear it, so it's not even like you're going into the pod and you're hearing the theme music that's playing. Only I hear it. That's fucked up. We've got to get another system. Sam, I'm gonna let you breathe fire second. We're gonna lose Bam in a second, so lots of big things happened today, Bam. Which one? Where do you want to start?
I want to start 10 years ago when I met you on Twitter, and I told you this was going to happen. I didn't tell you specifically that one day the Nets would have James Harden and Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, and they would look like their title favorites, and it would all fall apart. But I told you that this is why I'm negative about the Nets. It just doesn't ever work, even when it works. And this story planned today, which is why we're doing this podcast today, could
Mhm.
turn out to be nothing.
It's nothing.
But it just goes to show that nothing will ever be smooth with this franchise, not even the smoothies.
But I would argue, because I think you guys, your perspective is of a Nets fan's perspective, and you don't even realize how blessed you guys have been in comparison to some franchises in this city. Not saying that it's been great, no championships, there's nothing to write home about, but at the same time, there's been some really, really good teams, some really fun players to root for here. This franchise is not all doom and gloom. And I will submit to you, the Nets saved themselves with the Harden trade. Maybe they'll do something that makes them better again. You see no good could come from this? Bam? None?
Mr. Darboz, the fact that it got to a Harden trade encapsulates everything that always goes wrong with the Nets. Is that it should, like, the fact that he fell off a cliff in the second year with this team, the fact that he left because he was mad at Kyrie Irving, the fact that we get back a 25-year-old all-star who comes with frog-sized warts even so. They saved themselves because I guess they don't have to pay James Harden, but now they got to wait on pins and needles all season to see if Ben Simmons' feelings are in the right place. The Nets,
Listen.
the Nets have never. The Nets can't be saved. They can move to Brooklyn. They can change owners. They can change general managers. It's just something always is wrong.
Matt, I'll argue against you and say that the moment this trade was consummated, before this trade was consummated, not trade, the transaction, excuse me, the addition of Kyrie to the Brooklyn Nets. Didn't people say this was what was going to happen? Wasn't that recognized as the outcome that people were predicting, and it was just us as Nets fans going, no, it's not going to end up like that.
The thing with Kyrie was we knew he came with risks. There was Cleveland, which I think you'd say was a success. He left for other reasons, but he delivered for that franchise.
Right.
Then there was the Boston situation. You said, well, which guy are we getting? Now he chose us. He chose it with Kevin. He was from the area, and he said all the right things, and seemed like he was putting his best foot forward. And everything went well with Kyrie, in fairness, up until COVID hit.
No, that's not true.
That's true. Look, the stuff during the COVID year when he missed time and he went to his sister's birthday
none of
party.
this is if this was only COVID, Matt, be sensible here. If this was only what happened last year, none of this is part of the conversation. None of this.
Well, I'm
He'd be.
saying,
They would have gave
first
him the
off,
supermax, and it
hold
would have
on,
been
hold
over with.
on, hold on. First off, the start of COVID also includes what happened 2 seasons ago, where he didn't show up to work, right? So that's a part of that. So
Right.
the first year he had the shoulder injury, it happens, whatever.
Okay, but it's not just he didn't just have the shoulder injury. He didn't let them see it at first. They weren't sure. They were coming to press conferences asking people questions. No one could really answer what Kyrie was doing. Now, that may seem like a small thing, but again, it's one of these unnecessary things that didn't have to happen that we are privy to. That's probably one of 20 different things that we don't know. Like for the point that I'm always trying to make to you is, how bad is it that this level of talent is you're thinking about not giving him all of the money?
Well, and I'm curious to hear what Sam thinks about this, but we know one thing right now for sure. We know for sure right now the Nets are not willing to offer Kyrie Irving a full max extension, because if he did, this story never comes out today.
Correct.
What we don't know is, are they offering him no extension or something in between? That's kind of where we're all left in the dark here. I don't know what you guys think. Is it the latter? Are they offering him nothing, or are they offering something in between nothing and the full max?
Sam, come in on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think everything that you guys have said so far, I actually agree with both sides. I mean, I think the issue with what's going on here, and someone else said this well, but it just is the way it is like we're at a point where both sides need each other, because the Nets aren't going to be able to get most likely are not going to be able to get the value back that Kyrie brings to the table. And, Kyrie also, everyone keeps talking about this, and I think that a lot of people don't put enough perspective on it, is that Kyrie also wants to be here. Everything related to Kyrie revolves around New Jersey and New York, and I know he has a little bit of LA ties, but at the end of the day, this dude wants to be here, and he spent his entire time when he wasn't playing during COVID mostly in Jersey. He's here over the summer. I know he went to LA for a little bit, but he's been participating in a bunch of runs in New Jersey here also. So I think the bigger question at this point is not about, like you guys mentioned, obviously, who's at fault for the last couple of years. And as much as I think, Kyrie has not been a great member of the Brooklyn Nets, I think, unfortunately, to a certain extent, it's besides the point, because what we're trying to do is salvage this title window. And because of that, I think a lot of the points are moot, and they basically have to come to some type of, agreement one way or another, because I think we can all agree that losing him for nothing, no matter what you think about him, I don't care if you're the most anti at all, that is something that cannot happen. And so, I think to I guess in a long-winded way, to Bam, what you originally said, I think they are willing to give him some type of extension. And I think a lot of this right now is solely about respect, because if there's one thing we know that Kyrie is not motivated by money. This dude lost $14 million last year not playing. This dude just had his Nike deal basically evaporate. He's clearly someone who is making decisions based off of whatever's going on in his head, right or wrong. And so the
not
idea
very
that
smart.
So this idea that he needs a max, to me, is more about where he feels like he deserves to be in the Nets hierarchy, and not as much about, does he deserve a max because he's a quote unquote max player. And I think that we can all agree that Kyrie's we a lot of us see Kyrie as a lieutenant and not a commanding general. He's KD is the one who's earned his stripes in his time here, and Kyrie's not. And so that but I don't know. I mean, it's a mess, like one way or another. I mean, I think he's going to end up back here because I think both sides need each other, but it's clearly, I mean, ugly.
Matt,
I
respond
don't
to
think
that.
so. I think he's gone.
So, all right, so if you think he's gone, then you think that because I think Marks obviously, and this was something, Van, that you were ahead of the curve on everybody about, was that Marks clearly could have held somebody like Spencer Dinwiddie. Like he basically had him over the barrel because Dinwiddie wanted to go to Washington, but they didn't really have the ability to do it. And Marks basically made nice and did the whole sign and trade bullshit in order to let Spencer get what he wants. I don't think that Marks is going to do Kyrie any favors in letting him get to where he wants to get, if that's LA or, I mean, the Knicks for sure.
Hell no.
So I just don't know, like, I don't really know what his options are, because this idea that Kyrie's vindictive enough to, like, sign with San Antonio or Detroit to then, like, try to get traded 6 months later, like I think Christian Winfield said, like, I think that's lunacy. Like, for all you know, Kyrie could end up, for all you know, Kyrie, like, God forbid or something, could, you know, like, tear an ACL and then he's not getting traded anywhere. So
right.
That to me seems far-fetched, but like,
it's
how do you think this clears out then?
Hold on a second, guys. Hold on a second. Does anybody believe that that's remotely true? The Christian Whitfield report
about him going to, like, a crappy team.
Yeah, like of him going to, like, a team that could afford him right now, Portland, just so they could trade him at the trade deadline.
Whitfield's an idiot. No.
Come on,
I don't
man.
believe that. But
Who believes
I also
that?
don't believe that this report. Say it again.
No, I was just saying, who would believe that?
Yeah, nobody would believe that. Maybe some of the 14-year-olds with zits on Twitter. I think that when these types of things come out, I feel like the damage is already done. And Kyrie's a stubborn. Durant knows what's going on. The Nets, some of these people online, like, suggesting that Marks, like, doesn't understand, like, well, we can't, replace Irving. Like, the guy's not a fucking idiot. He understands that. So I don't think that they made an offer with a hard line in the sand that this is our offer or lack thereof, take it or leave it, opt in or leave, that they've had that without having discussions with agents and other teams and having some sort of idea of what they can bring back for him in a opt in and then trade, and then he signs an extension with someone else.
Matt, the first person that knew they were going this direction was Kevin Durant. We've been breaking this down for a minute. If Kevin Durant has been telling everybody this summer that I believe in hierarchy, I believe in letting the coach the team and the general manager to pick the team. He's been, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he's been kind of sending that message out. You've heard that, right, Sam, Bam? Like, you guys have heard that, right?
Right. I'm just an employee.
Exactly. So I think he's known for a long time that this was coming, and he's all right with it. He signed.
Yeah.
He signed. The concept that really just bothers me of all the nonsense coming out of Nets Twitter right now is the concept that if Kyrie leaves, Kevin Durant is going to be mad and force his way out.
Well, not directly, but this is the beginning of the end of Kevin Durant on the Nets. And I was tweeting this during last season that by this, I think I either said 2023-24 or 2024-25, all three guys, Harden, Irving, and Durant, won't be here. And it's, we're slowly picking them off. So what will happen is they'll trade Irving. It'll probably be a team we don't expect, maybe a Denver, Dallas, or something to that effect. And he'll say, all right, I'll stick this out a year with the assets we got back, and Ben, see how it goes. Ben will, inevitably fail, because that's going to be a failure.
See, that's where.
Then Durant will say, I'm out of here.
See, but do you see where you have to have a strong imagination? The Nets team last year, before Kyrie came back, was a first place team. They were a better team. And you didn't have a guy like Ben Simmons on that team.
No, you
I,
had
I'm
James Harden.
I, I'm talking about the times that James wasn't there. I'm talking about those stretches
That was
where
like
they didn't
5
have
games.
James Harden.
That was like 5 games. That's
The
not
COVID.
a sustainable sample size. But I told you guys I only got like 10 minutes. I'm gonna hop off. I'm just telling you right now that this Irving is out of here, and then the next step will be sometime in 2023, maybe even sooner. But my guess is sometime in 2023, the end of the Kevin Durant era will be there.
So Sam, please remember on which sides of this argument that we were on.
I hate the Nets. I hate the Nets.
You love the fucking Nets. Get out of here, man.
I mean, look, I think so. So I agree with you on the Durant stuff. I think like the sky is falling Durant stuff is crazy. And to be honest, I think what you could see is like if let's say Kyrie says that he really wants to go to the Lakers or whoever. Like I just looked at the numbers. Like the Lakers are so over the cap because of this Westbrook thing that and they have so few assets. And I know that you've mentioned this on Twitter a bunch, and people just don't really want to listen to pure like people like me and you actually like looking at like the math of this stuff and the numbers. Like even if the Lakers were able to dump Westbrook, they're still going to have to get some money back to the point that Kyrie would have to take such a massive pay cut. Like and for all this talk about, you know, Kyrie talking this big game of wanting to get like a max and an extension in some place he can call home, yada yada yada. Like he's not going to get that with any of these deals. And the only other thing I wanted to say about on the Kyrie topic, and I know like we all have a lot of different things to say about him, is that for all this talk about a guy who, and this is part of the reason why I loved him coming here, even with everything he had. For all the talk about him, like growing up a Nets fan and being from here and wearing Jersey on his back, like New Jersey on his back, like if the dude is legitimately going to leave because Sean Marks said what he said to him at a press conference and he doesn't love that he's, you know, the captain of the ship and he's not getting the same respect or whatever, then like, I mean, like, honestly, like to a certain extent, all you can do is throw your hands up. Like, I understand that the Nets are also in a tough spot. They need to replace his talent somehow. But like, then the guy isn't who he said he was going to be. If you're going to leave because of some unbelievably benign comments that Marks made in a press conference, when like a month later, Pat Riley says, "Yeah, Tyler Hero, you have to earn it," and Kyle Lowry, you were fat. Like it's
Sam,
just
the reason why that report came out today was because Sean Marks said to Kyrie Irving's people, "Opt in. I'll see how this year goes, and we'll work something out." That's why we're here today. Like, do you understand how many things would have to fall in place for the theory of Kyrie is doing this because Sean Marks said something in a press conference? After the press conference, Kyrie said, "I want to be with the Nets. This is the only place." He's been saying it every week. The only people not saying it is Sean Marks and Kevin Durant. Why should we even make anything far fetched? I don't get it. I don't understand why don't we believe the words coming out of Sean Marks' mouth?
I mean, look, I'm with you. I think that look, I'm very conflicted generally on this topic because I'm like a realist who understands that if they lose Kyrie for nothing, it's as big of a blow as you can basically have, or even if they lose him for basically like pennies on the dollar, it's pretty much like a knife into like the championship window of this team. They have to get like something real back. But at the same time, I'm also someone who, and I don't know if this is like how I was raised or whatever, I don't like blaming people who have more often than not done the right thing versus someone who hasn't done the right thing. And so, people like to disregard when me and you bring up things like, there was the thing with the shoulder injury, and then there was the bubble, and then there was the leaving during the January 6th stuff, and then there was the vaccine. And like, And you can make your excuse for all that stuff, but all I know is, like, at the end of the day, like, someone like Sean Marks or Joe Tsai or Kevin Durant have given way more to the Nets and to Nets fans and to someone like me or you than Kyrie Irving has. And so it's hard for me to then, be so upset with Sean Marks and Joe Tsai or whoever when they're acting the way they are, because, like, these guys are in a business, and, like, part of being in a business is, what are you getting back from your employees and your assets? And so,
Sam, here's the algorithm. Here's the algorithm that Joe Tsai and Sean Marks have to do. Kyrie wants X. Why should it be more than what they could get on the open market? If someone would trade you a max player that is not Russell Westbrook, of course, that's never going to happen. That's not on the table. No one's talking about that. That's complete BS. The Nets would never take Russell Westbrook back. They'd rather take nothing than take Russell Westbrook back. That is a fact. That is not worth arguing. Anyway, the algorithm. Can the Nets get on the open market the salary equivalent of Kyrie Irving as a supermax player? Can they? Is there a trade out there where the Nets get equal value for Kyrie's supermax contract? Is that on deck? Is that possible?
Yeah, no, right. I don't think so, but I also think you are right in that. And this alludes to what Bam said, and I agree with both of you, which is that this notion that everyone says Sean Marks is playing with fire or whatever. If Sean Marks and or Joe Tsai look out their window and they're like, we're not going to get even close to 75 or 80% value of what Kyrie is. If they wanted to, they could offer him a full max right away and be like, okay, this is all done. Like,
right.
At the end of the day, it's much easier for Kyrie to not have to uproot his family and move and be a part of a new team and work out all the kinks of all that stuff, and also leave his best friend, who he continues to say is his best friend and he's never going to leave. Like, it's way easier to say that, or it's way easier to do that and just continue to sign, which the Nets could easily do. Like, if they look outside and see, like, yeah, you know what? There's actually, we called Dallas about Brunson, or we called the Hornets about Bridges, or we called the Clippers to see if we could get Paul George, or if it's not Paul George, maybe Norman Powell and Terrence Mann and other stuff, whatever it is. Like, they're allowed to do their due diligence, just like Kyrie is clearly doing his due diligence by floating out this.
Kyrie leaked it to Shams, right?
Yep.
We're clear on that. Like, it seems like the entire NBA Twitter is clear that Kyrie leaked that to Shams. Do you think?
What you said, what you tweeted was also completely right. There was that one paragraph, which I think anyone who's listening to this should look at your Twitter handle at Thorn. The Twitter handle the article at one point had a paragraph that literally could have been copied and pasted off the notes section of Kyrie's stepmom's phone.
Right.
Like, it was like ridiculous.
Right.
It was
right.
like the Nets will be in a very damaging spot if I'm not here, whatever. Like,
right. If I leave, this whole thing comes down. I don't think there's anything more despicable than a so-called Nets fan who is blackmailing the Nets with KD leaving if Kyrie leaves. That, I feel like, is pretty horrible shit. That's nasty stuff right there, my brother. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I mean, I just think this whole situation, what I think is so funny about the whole thing is, like, when you boil it all down, why is this all happening? And this is all everything that's happening right now, all of it, 110% of it is because of Kyrie. This wasn't like some
and we predicted it.
And we predicted 100%. We predicted
not because we're geniuses, because this was the obvious way it was always gonna fucking end.
But this notion that Sean Marks, which some people think, and we know who it is, like in the Nets, like writers world or Twitter world, whatever it is, this notion that Sean Marks and Joe Tsai have some vendetta against Kyrie that's been there since Jump Street is so
some
insane.
of the stupidest takes I've ever heard.
It's so dumb and it's so unfounded. And that if you were to look and you were to put side by side, do like a pro con list or whatever of what the Nets have done for Kyrie versus what Kyrie has done for the Nets, it's so ridiculous for anyone to think of this situation and be like, "Wow, dude!" Like I personally, I try to like get into other people's shoes. I don't see how you could look at the situation and be like, like the Nets have really mistreated Kyrie. What?
Right.
Like, what?
Right.
What are we talking about here?
But people aren't really dissecting. That's where I'm so disappointed with the newsmen of the Nets news people, the Nets beat writers, because there's some simple formulations that you could tell yourself what's happening. Look, it's not like this happened because of COVID. When he took his COVID stance, the moment it happened, they took the contract off the table.
Yep.
They were going to re-sign him back in August. When he did what he did, it threw a monkey wrench in everything. And
Yves,
it's just that simple. That's all I'm saying. Like it's not like I have to make up something that doesn't make complete and total sense. He literally they had Sean Marks doesn't share with the people at home what's going on. It's not until it's happening does he say anything. Now he's telling you, yeah, we're signing Kyrie, we're signing Harden, we just finished up with KD. Everything is a go with everyone else. It's not because of COVID that we're here. It's because of all the other shit that happened before COVID. Because when the COVID thing happened, that was the last straw. That was the moment. That was the moment that that they basically was like, okay, enough. This is enough. Am I tripping? What am I making up? Where is the lie?
No, you're 100% right, and this is what I would like to say to every fan. And me and you have tweeted this directly, indirectly, whatever you want to call it, subtweeting or not even being aggressive, not passive aggressive. But I want people to imagine that Andrew, like, think about what the Warriors know now about Wiggins getting vaccinated and what he's turned his complete reputation and career around. And imagine what had happened had he missed, let's say, 2/3 of the season, and it caused Otto Porter to play 40 minutes a game, and just like what happened with Patty Mills, and it caused wear and tear on Steph and Clay and Draymond, Clay especially coming off injuries and stuff, and how once you have one missing piece, it leads to dysfunction and whatnot. And how can any Net fan
you to properly calculate that, you got to add some shit that didn't even happen, and
right, exactly.
And one of them asked to be traded. Pick one.
Right, and imagine that because Wiggins wasn't playing and the Warriors still wanted to win, they traded Wiseman or Kuminga or Moses Moody or Jordan Poole because and instead of letting those guys develop and hang out or whatever, into what they've become and what it looks like they're going to become, which is staples on this team for the next 10 years. And what you how can any Net fan not look back on this season and think, wow, that, like, no matter what your opinion is, even on the vaccination stuff,
right.
Like even if you're somewhat sympathetic, you can still see the sliding doors. Like, they're literally right in front of you. Vegas is pretty smart. We all agree about that. The Nets were the favorites to win the title throughout the entire year. Because everyone knew, all the sharp guys in Nevada all knew that this team was unbeatable with those three guys, and even those two guys if you have a healthy Ben Simmons. And instead, like, fans look at this past season and are like, yeah, like Sean Marks and Joe Tsai are in the wrong. Like, I
I'm
don't.
dumbfounded. I'm verklempt.
It's just crazy. Like I don't know. I just don't know how people like don't look at the Warrior season, which is something that me and you were immediately texting after it,
Right.
and being like, "Wow, this is such a huge bummer." Like you look at someone like Wiggins. Wiggins was considered like having one of the worst contracts in basketball. He had this now anti-vax thing at the beginning of the year. Now you have people saying like, "Wow, if he gets another All-Star game, this dude's going to be considered for the Hall of Fame or something like that." Like it's crazy.
People were arguing for him to be the playoff MVP. That's
Right.
how good he was. Like Wiggins bums me out with the Kyrie stuff, but Wiggins gets me excited because Ben Simmons' value has never been as low as Wiggins. Like Wiggins, they just was like, dude can't play, and he was a throw-in in a trade. They were trying to get off Wiggins, and they basically threw him in for D'Angelo Russell. So it's amazing what that part, gets me excited because Ben could be that guy, but at the same time, it's disheartening to just see like how big of an effect Wiggins had just by him doing the selfless thing. He didn't want to do it. Even in his press conferences after doing it, he was like, "I'm only doing this for basketball reasons," and that's sacrifice, my boy. Okay. Let's steer this thing into a place where we could end this thing, because nothing has really happened.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you what I think is going to happen, and you could then tell me what you think is going to happen.
Let's do it.
I already know what I think is going to be different from you, because I think he opts in, right? He only has days before he has to. If there's going to be a trade with the Lakers, it has to be before the 29th when they become hard capped. Have you heard that? Am I imagining that, Sam?
I believe you're right. I'm not totally sure, but I believe you're right.
Okay, not knowing exactly how it works. I didn't do all of the capology takes, but I'm pretty sure that if they trade after the 29th, right? It's they're hard capped, so they couldn't do it. Both the Clippers and the Lakers. So if they were gonna do something, it would have to start moving really, really fast, and the negotiation couldn't be crazy. So that's one. Now, I'm going to say that Kyrie is going to opt in, and when he opts in, oh, by the way, Trey just walked in the room. Trey, is Kyrie going to be on the Nets next year?
Hope so.
Okay, there we go. There's from Trigger Trey. Anyway, I think Kyrie opts in and they keep it moving. What do you think?
I think he ends up getting like I think they basically come to a middle point of like 3 years, whatever, 110 or whatever it kind of is. I know Kool-Aid mentioned on the last podcast. That's kind of where I see it going. But look, there is something to what Bam said, which is that a lot of times lately, once the smoke kind of comes, like there's been fire. Like, I mean, I was in the camp that didn't really think that the second Harden trade would ever happen, and it did. I didn't even think the first Harden trade was going to happen, and it did. But I mean, the issue is I just think that if push came to shove, if Kyrie was offered like a huge deal by the Nets because the Nets realize they're not getting anything back, is Kyrie actually vindictive enough to sign like a minimum or whatever, not a minimum contract, but something incredibly small with like the Lakers or Clippers or Knicks?
I'm not even sure that I'm confident that Kyrie has the representation that understands those little finer points.
Well, that's a great point, by the way, because the agent stuff is a huge thing in this. Like as we saw with the Harden stuff, that's actually something that no one talks about. That's real. That's totally on point. Like
she's probably a brilliant lawyer, but this is her first go around.
Right, 100%. Like
as an agent.
part of the reason why the Harden thing got so messy was because he was like basically leaking to reporters with those two. What were they? They were two like Wasserman agents who weren't even like full basketball agents, and like that's partially why that thing got so gross and that there was so much miscommunication. And
Right. They didn't have any grown-ups running the nursery school over there.
Look, we'll know that things have gotten crazy when Kanye is leaking to Woj or something like that, and that's when.
No, Kanye going on TMZ on a full rant on why Kyrie is a genius and that they should give him a supermax for things that have nothing to do with basketball. You're supposed to take that energy and turn it into a championship, even when he doesn't play. I can see it right now. I can see Kanye spinning that whole joint right there, and 14-year-olds are agreeing with it. It's crazy. It's about, if you think it's crazy now, it's about to get really crazy, Sam.
What I also love, by the way, is I love how, and you've been making this free market argument about Kyrie the whole time, which I do think is like the smartest way of looking at free agency, which is like Kyrie, when he's playing on the court, is like at worst a top like 15 or 16 guy in the league.
I think he's top 10.
Well, yeah, he may be even top 10, right? Exactly.
I think he's top 10 easily when he is playing.
And this idea, though, that he is like that he might get traded for like Luke Kennard or something like that. If that doesn't show people on the outside what everyone else thinks about Kyrie, and I mean everyone else that isn't part of like the Nets Twitter or like wears Kyrie shoes or like for some reason whenever he tweets something feels the need to retweet it because they think it's gospel. Like your value is what everyone else thinks of you, and it's clear that the entire NBA world, that I think, as we all know, is smarter than it's ever been. You don't have these like dumbass idiots running these teams anymore. You have people who are like mathematically and basketball wise sound,
right,
and understand the value that each player puts onto the court.
I'll give you an example, Sam. Not to cut you off, but
no, go ahead.
to show what you're saying is so right. The 76ers have already leaked that they're not giving him the max. They're not giving Harden the max.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, look, that tells you who has the leverage really in that argument. Who the leaker doesn't have the leverage. Can you agree with me on that? Like,
I know and that is a great point. It's like look, Harden, like Harden, like you don't see people on Twitter being like, wow, like the Sixers really owe Harden because he did the wink deal and like whatever. It's like, no, like that's not how this stuff works. Like right. Harden cost himself $100 million, if not more, because he came to camp fat and hasn't gotten back into shape and had a miserable playoff where basically he was good every 3.5, 4 games. Like, and right. So for everyone who thinks that like if that Kyrie, isn't actually the like distraction or controversial person that he is, well, the market clearly says otherwise, because if Kyrie right. wasn't such a distraction, the Nets would be able to get the world and then some for him. Like, but they
know what? You know what's the most telling of it all is KD.
Yep.
I hate the blackmail that people who are pro Kyrie are spreading, saying, well, if you don't sign back Kyrie, Kevin Durant's going to ask to leave. First of all, how would it hurt Kevin Durant's legacy to force his way out of the Nets after everything that happened? You think that KD wants to take that PR hit? No. No way. You think if anyone believes, I'm not even asking, I want you to speak on it. Excuse me, Sam. I want you to speak on it, but I'm not asking a question. I'm making a statement. It is foolish to think that Sean Marks have taken the stance that he's taken and said what he said in previous press conferences without having cleared it with Kevin Durant. If you believe that, you are a fool. Period.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's what I mean. Alex Schiffer of the Athletic did kind of like a live thing today, and he basically said like the idea that Durant doesn't know what's going on with this stuff and that he hasn't at least indirectly or implicitly co-signed this is kind of crazy. And so that's why for everyone thinking that this is like leading to World War III within the Nets, I just think is not true. And by the way, two things can be true. Two things can be true. It could be true that Kyrie and KD are still really close friends, but at the same time, KD's just like, this experiment just hasn't worked out for me. Which would prove kind of everything that we've been saying this whole time, which is that like this isn't the be all end all, but simultaneously like stuff isn't as good as it was 2 years ago.
Right. If everything is, going like it's supposed to and normal, if it's just the stuff that we know, Kyrie has a contract. It's signed. And we're not even talking about any of this. There's so much shit going on with this team that Goran Dragic looked disgusted. You remember what they were asking him? Is he coming back? And he was like, nah. Goran Dragic is like basically saying, playing with Kevin Durant, nah. We learned nothing from the James Harden trade. We've learned nothing as a society, as a net society, because that trade was screaming why we are here right now, Sam. The man came here to get a cheap championship. He was behind the scenes in our locker room, hearing the words coming out of Kyrie Irving's mouth that we would never hear. And he decided, this shit is crazy. I want out. That should have told us everything. But now he's a bitch. That's what we learned. James Harden is a bitch, Sam.
I mean, it's like, look, everybody is gonna. This is why, like, the Kyrie thing is very similar to political topics or like the polarization. It's like everybody who's pro Kyrie at this point is gonna twist their arm into whatever direction, even if it means snapping it and then breaking it and putting it back together and then snapping it again, in order to support him. And like, there are things that he's done that I agree with, and there's things that he's done that I disagree with. Me and you were speaking on like what we've seen, but the blind loyalty to him, I just think is weird, and I don't get it. And to be the only saving grace if he does leave is that we're gonna have way fewer people talking to us on Twitter, because I think that the Nets are gonna lose a decent.
Oh, there's gonna be a purge.
Social media fans, and they'll all go to, and then the Lakers or the Clippers or the Knicks, whoever it is. And by the way, let me just say this one thing quickly before we go. If Kyrie thinks that things will be better in Los Angeles or New York with the Knicks, he is just greatly like. If he thinks the media has been unfair to him here, he's basically been playing for a mid-market franchise in terms of like media coverage. Like, Absolutely. He is greatly mistaken, because those two have reporters who aren't even local, who travel for every single game and follow him around, and it's going to be endless.
Yep. There won't be any beat writers that are stands. It's not going to be that easy going forward.
No, like, absolutely. And yeah, the microscope is going to be insane. Maybe with the Clippers, it would be somewhat okay, but like, I don't know. I think the situation is so messy, but it's all so predictable, and at the same time, from Kyrie's perspective, was so avoidable, which is what makes it just so frustrating.
He's gonna opt in, and when he opts in, the Nets are gonna say, "Prove it, and that's it." And we'll go on through our season, and the only people that'll be mad is Kyrie stands. He'll play, and Nobody wants to be the one who gets caught holding the bag for the player that told you directly, that looked into cameras that was their cameras and said that basketball is not the most important thing. The person who has to give that player 260, what I guess it's 200 million is the most that he could get, right? Something like that. 190.
Yeah.
You know, the person who has to give that up, and that, excuse me, it's not COVID. The person you still have to give that check, but the person who has to pay that is the loser. Not as big of a loser as the person who has to pay Harden. And I don't believe that report at all. That's not all they're going to have to pay Harden. Harden is going to get his money. But the person who has to pay him is the loser. They're the biggest. They're the biggest loser. Anything else before we put a bow on this one?
No, I mean, look, I mean, what I'm annoyed about is that if Kyrie cares about the Nets, he should work with the Nets to get this done, because it would be helpful to know like what their needs are going to be with or without him, one way or another, because we got the draft coming up.
For shits and giggles, what does a Clippers trade look like?
I mean, if assuming that Paul George isn't involved, I think it's probably, like the 2 of the 3 of Reggie Jackson, Norman Powell, Luke Kennard, and hopefully they get hopefully they get one of the young guys like Mann or BJ Boston or something.
You'd have to get both of them. You have to get both of them. That's not enough.
That's what you hope.
Anyway, this is my friend. Oh, you're not at Samuel O'Chow no more.
No,
Give him your handle. Give him the new handle.
You know what? I don't even know what it is. Just look up Bob Sacamano and you'll find somebody.
And you know who the hell we are.
Got a New Yorker picture of my Twitter avatar or whatever is my favorite New Yorker cover, which is KD and Kyrie and Harden looking like they're about to stampede on RJ Barrett.
We are Pod Thorn.
Peace.
Pod Thorn. Pod Thorn. Pod Thorn.